Here we are, bro. How to make an EP or album DIY from scratch. Velvet Year, Seth Goodwin. We'll drop a like. You know what I'm saying? You can hit this if you want to. But yeah, let's see what we're
For
talking
fun
about.
right now, and I asked you guys on Instagram if you wanted
Oh
me
yeah,
to
like,
make
comment,
a mini
subscribe,
doc
share,
about it
notifications,
after it comes out,
all that.
or if you just wanted me to talk through my process of making an EP. And by far, everybody just wanted to see the process, which I'm excited to jump into because I feel like there is not as much practical information about how to make an album or EP today. Like the things that people run into making an EP or an album today are just so unique to the era that we're in because, well, here, let's just jump into it. So my problems with a lot of the advice that's out right now about how to make an album or an EP is that it's not really for like the modern DIY artist. Like for perspective, I'm going to be writing, producing, mixing, and mastering this thing all by myself just because I know how to do it. And every single video I look up on YouTube about how to do an album or an EP, it's just kind of like listing out the steps of the process that the song kind of has to go through. Like first you write it, then you produce it, then you mix, and it's like that's not really how the artist goes through the process. Like that's what the song goes through, but I don't think that that's like a great way to frame it for somebody who's just on their own. I also feel like a problem that a lot of people have with making an album or an EP is there's not a lot of clear advice for how to take certain steps. Like a lot of advice is just like, well, you make the song, like you write it out and then you produce it, and you're just like, okay, well, how do you do that? How do you go through the process of like actually like completing a song that's just an idea right now? I think another problem that people don't address is the fact that a lot of people are producers now. Music production technology is very accessible, and so a lot of people, when they're coming in and they're bringing demos, these are normally like base productions that can be expanded out into a full idea, and I don't see a lot of advice accounting for that. So I want to walk through the process that I recommend most people start when they're making an album or an EP. But before we jump into that, I want to have like some big brother advice time here. Because if I'm being completely honest, my biggest reason for not recommending most people make an album or an EP is that they are not ready. You know, the standard advice for when you are making a project is to write 2.5 times the material that is going to end up being on the actual release. So if
Check.
you are releasing a single, you know, you should have at least 3 songs written so that you can choose the best one. If you're making a 5-song EP, you should have 15 songs written and pick the best from those. If you're making a
Don't mean to toot my own horn, but over the summer, I made 27 songs. Past summer, I made 16. Before the summer, I had a cool 5 that were decent. And I got 23 throwaways from extraneous times. I've been ready. Well, like, I want to say I've been ready, but song wise, I've been ready. I feel like now I'm quality ready to at least step into it.
12-song album, you should have 30 songs written. And a lot of people I know, they're trying to jump into this process
Oh,
before
yeah.
their writing volume has really gotten to the point where it justifies it. And I think a thing to keep in mind is that a song is kind of like a painting. Like a song can like sit as like its own piece of art, and people can appreciate a song separate from the album itself. Whereas an album or an EP is like an art exhibit. Like it is a very lavish production, and I mean production just in the grandest sense. Like it is a lot of work for a painter to put on an art exhibit. And what I see a lot of people doing who are trying to make albums or EPs is they have not actually gone through the process of like finishing an individual painting enough to where an album is warranted. They just really wish that they had the identity associated with the prestige of having an exhibit or an album. And if I had to
That is
distill
me.
this into a sentence, it would be loving the process versus loving the result. And the people who I think should be making albums and EPs are people who love the process of just making songs. Like they've just written a bunch, they're constantly writing stuff to the point where they have an excess amount of work that they can then turn into an album or an EP. And I think the people who should probably hold off on making an album or an EP are people who love the idea of having an EP or an album out, but have not actually gone through the process of writing a bunch of music. And, you know, that might be a hard thing to swallow, but I think that
Pause. with it, saying double entendre. But I wanted to have an album for like since freshman year, and I had enough songs for it. I was just trash. In the sophomore year, I was better, but still trash. Junior year, better, trash. But you know what I'm saying? Every single song I've made, I love. So I loved the process the entire time. It's just I didn't love the result. Or like the way he's talking about is the way I felt before, you know what I'm saying? And so yeah, I like what he's talking about. He's talking his words can also go through out of my mouth. You know what I'm saying?
It's important to state upfront because a lot of people can like burn themselves out trying to make an album or an EP before they are ready, and it can kind of turn them off of music for a long time. So I would just say before you even consider making an album or an EP, just look through the songs that you've written and ask, do you have like 2.5 times the amount of material that the album or EP would eventually be? So if you want to release a 6-song EP, do you have 18 songs? Like, they don't need to be fully fleshed out, fully finished, but do you have at least like 18 ideas that you're like started with? If so, we can move on to the next part. I think something that a lot of people make the mistake of when they start making an album is they stop listening to music while they are making their album. And to just straight up quote something from Stephen King's book, if you do not have time to read, you do not have the time or the tools to write. In the exact same way, if you do not have time to listen to music, you do not have the time or the tools to make music. Go on Instagram, ask people what albums you should be listening to. The more weird and out there suggestions you get, the better. And from now on, instead of watching TV or watching YouTube at night, you are listening to an album front to back that you have never listened to before. I think another thing that a lot of people fail at with making an album or an EP is not establishing their expectations before the project starts. You know, when an author makes a book, they have like a goal of like, this is how many copies I want to sell. Actually, not even just in terms of sales, just like what do they expect this to do for them? You know, I have a lot of people who will jump on a call with me and their expectation is that we're gonna do an album and that they are instantly going to get signed by a record label. And it's just like, okay, well, that expectation doesn't really match what is really capable of happening right now. And I think that's important to state. And even if you don't have that extreme expectations of, no, I like making music, I just want to make an album because I really want to make an album, that is totally good. I still think you should list out what are your expectations for it doing, because a lot of people I know, they will say that their expectations are lower than they actually are in an attempt to like not disappoint themselves or like not raise their hopes up too much. So they'll say things like, oh, this album is just for me. I don't care if anybody listens to it or not. I don't care how much money it makes. And they'll say all these things that they've heard other artists say, but then their album comes out, they don't do any promotion, they don't do any like content structure for it, and then their album gets, you know, a couple hundred streams over the course of its existence, and they get so bummed about it because all of this stuff was not them really being honest with themselves. They would like to make some money from their album, and the fact that they are releasing it into a public sphere kind of proves that they're not just making it for them. They do want other people to listen to it. And I would even voice it plainly as this: if blank happens, I'll feel like it was worth it. And the inverse of that, if blank doesn't happen, I'll feel it wasn't worth it. And again, nobody can really reach into your soul and answer these questions for you. You're going to have to figure these things out for yourself. So, an example of this album.
I don't really have an audience, so I can't really go off of if I get X amount of people. I don't even have a Spotify account. So I'm making this for me and kind of for my family. So the people that I'll be shoving my music in their face and be like, hey, is this good? Is this good? Is this good? If they like it and they're like, and I get like exceptional glaze from it, anything above is nice. if I finish it and the tune is like, or ooh, she don't care. If my sisters or my girlfriend or my cousins are like, this is trash, I don't know about this one, they'd be like, what if they said it was mid? Depends on who say. Depends on what percent is mid. If they're calling the entire thing mid, I don't know how I feel about that one. I ain't gonna lie to you. So I got a small group of people I want W's from.
Album for me is I really have felt like I've pushed my own music to the side for a long time because of the production business. I eventually do want to do a larger like ad campaign for a future like full-length album. And so this EP for me, it's actually kind of not the full shebang. This is going to be like almost an add-on at checkout for a full-length album that I eventually make. Like I've just not done anything music related for so long that just like getting something out there, I think, is the main point. I don't really think Spotify stream numbers are going to be that important for me, just because, again, I do music production as a full-time job. So for me, this is also a way to add credibility for my business. And so if somebody stumbles across my YouTube channel and they want to hire me for a production, them seeing that I have an album out that I have recently released and it sounds good, like I charge a pretty decent rate. One person hiring me from that will almost recoup the cost of everything I'm talking about for the ad campaign and the CDs and everything. All that stuff out of the way. Let me break down the actual process I'm going to be using to make my EP, which I kind of teased a bit at the beginning of the video. And I'm basically going to be stealing this from Stephen King's book on writing, which I think is a great book to read just if you are creative. The beginning of it is mainly just him talking about his early life as a writer, but in the middle section, there is a giant chunk where he just walks through the process of making a fiction novel from the perspective of a writer in the process that he goes through. And he's explaining it to somebody who's maybe never written one before. It's genuinely really good, and I recommend people read it. And I've essentially translated Stephen King's process of writing a book or a fiction book into making an EP or an album, which I think fits a lot better with how people are working on music right now. The reason why I like seeing your album or EP as like a fiction book is, first of all, fiction writers are almost entirely by themselves. All right. Like I said, recording technology and producing technology has gotten so far to the point where people are making full releases by themselves in their bedroom. Like the new Breakin's album, Hypochondriac, this dude just did this entire album by himself. He wrote it, recorded it, produced it, mixed it, and mastered it all by himself. And it has multiple songs on here that have at least 10 million streams. Every song has at least like 3 million streams. And just in terms of like how budgets for records and stuff like that are shaping up to be, I think that is going to be the way of the future. People are going to be making their albums primarily by themselves. And when you look through the normal way of making a record that people talk about, it's like first you write all the songs, then you produce all the songs, then you mix all the songs. It's like that is a process that, yes, all of your songs will have to go through each of those steps, but for you as like a creative, that's not really the best way to tackle the project of an album or an EP. That's a framework that was made while you were working with like large groups in studios where you had a band that would all write the songs. You would have a producer who would produce the songs, a mixer who would mix the songs. And like when you're a fiction author, you have to do a lot of stuff by yourself. And so there's a lot more practical advice on how to be creative with these larger projects over a long period of time by yourself. Another reason I like it is because you tend to think of stuff not as here's a finished song or a not finished song. You see stuff in terms of drafts, and I will get into it a little bit, but a draft and how authors describe their first draft and their second draft and their third draft, for me, feels a lot more accurate to how musicians see their songs. They are never done per se. They're very nebulous, and I feel like a lot of the advice that people give to authors or people who are writing fiction, you tend to understand that there's a little bit more of a gray area in terms of when it's done, because like similar to songs. A book doesn't really have like a cutoff point, especially if you're writing fiction. You just kind of have to decide it's done. And I feel like there's a lot more practical advice in that realm for people who are making albums and EPs. And I think another thing that I really love about this framework is that in this process, there are very clearly defined steps for when are you working on something by yourself, sort of slaving away at something in the dark with the door closed, versus when you bring other people into the process and how you incorporate other people into the process so that you're not just by yourself. I have ADHD, so if I am left to my own devices, I will just never get anything done. And so having like a very clearly set up framework for how to introduce other people into the process, for me, it kind of relieves a lot of that tension. But all right, so let's just start talking through the process of planning this thing out. A lot of people like the advice of starting with a date that you wanted to get done by, which I think can be a good thing, also maybe not. I mean, I definitely think that you can have like a date where you're like, all right, I know I want to get the album done by this, but I think a better way to frame that context is with this video. I think the advice that Jerry Jenkins gives in this video, How to Write a Book, 13 Steps from a Best-Selling Author, I think that his advice is a lot more practical. You start with your date where you want to be done by, and then you sort of look at how many days you have and break apart all of the little steps to get to that goal. He talks about like eating an elephant one bite at a time. So for authors like him, they have like daily word counts that they want to hit, which for me, I like a lot more as a framework, because instead of saying I have to make this EP or I have to make this album, which seems very daunting, saying I need to write the lyrics for this song today, like breaking it into steps like that can be very helpful. I think it's a little bit harder to get like an accurate like word count style goal per day, just because with an author who's doing their first draft, they're kind of doing this one thing over and over again, which is just writing and writing and writing. Whereas with musicians, I feel like it's a little bit more nebulous. But I still think that like having like a daily goal of just like, I'm gonna set a timer and just work on the album or EP for an hour every night, and just be like, all right, for this season of my life, I'm just gonna not watch YouTube. I'm not gonna watch a Netflix show in the evening. I'm just gonna set an hour aside in the evening to just work on my album, which is literally what I do. I'm going on like a dopamine fast because of my ADHD, and so as a result, I just have a lot more time because I'm not watching YouTube. I'm not watching TV anymore. And so having a framework of literally just grab a timer, set it for an hour, and just pick one thing you're gonna give up to work on your album or EP. All right, the next step is the rough draft, where you are not trying to get the final sound like completely done. Stephen King talks about like unearthing the fossil when you're making a book, which is like you are slowly uncovering this thing and you're getting the bigger bones out. But then later on in the process, you need to get like tiny brushes and like clean away debris and stuff like that. Once you have like your EP and album tracks or ideas sort of planned out, like arranging them in the way that you know you want the album to flow a little bit, which is just like a fun process of just like making a story in your head and being like, okay, what sounds like the intro track of a movie? What sounds like the ending track of a movie? Organize them and get rough drafts going for all of them. So this could mean rough lyrical ideas, a simple full-length arrangement with maybe just an acoustic guitar, some broad stroke production. So if you've already started with like a lightly produced demo, just getting like that filled out to like the full length of a song with like a vocal melody, and just doing that for all of the songs that you have. It needs to be fast, zippy, sloppy, completely throwing out every idea you have with no judgment. The way Stephen King says it, the door is closed. You are not showing this to anybody right now. You are not looking to get validation from showing it to people. You're not posting it on Instagram, nothing. This is just you. All right. Stephen King has talked about how like he would not show his worst enemy his first draft to make them read it. It is always bad, but it gets you in the flow of just like throwing your ideas out and not just restricting stuff. I would highly recommend checking out this video on Trout Mask Replica by Vox, and specifically this graphic where they talk about capturing your sort of naive influences in these boxes of more of a presentable form. them. So in this rough draft, we are capturing all of those sort of naive outbursts of creativity so that later on we can then refine them into something else. But we need to capture them without judgment. We need to get them on paper or just in the DAW in this case. This is a long process and it can be kind of intense. So after you do it, do whatever you do to celebrate. Like, have a little fun time where you just go to the movies or just order out, have a dinner, go to the bar, whatever. Just something that you do to celebrate, hang out with friends. I would say follow Stephen King's advice and just take a break from it. And when I say a break from it, I mean like a hardcore break. Like, you are not allowed to listen to it for a week. You can't have demos on your phone that you're listening to. We are not in that stage. We have captured all of the rough ideas and the naivety of like a kid playing with Legos and the fun side of it. But now we need to slowly pull back so that we can be objective. And if you're constantly around something like that, you can't be objective with it. So you need to take a break. Honestly, having another project might even help, especially if it's like not music. If you like are into photography or some other art thing, like just go do something else for like a week and like don't listen to the songs or anything. Rick Rubin actually has a policy where he doesn't allow bands that he's working with to listen to the demos because he knows that that's how demoitis sets in, and he wants them to be creative enough to say, oh, I like this, let's change it. And you kind of limit your ability to do that when you are constantly listening to the same demo over and over and over again, because then you become familiar with it. And the same way that, you know, you'll listen to a song that you know super well and then somebody will do a cover or a remix and it just sounds wrong. It's because the elements that you are familiar with, that your brain really likes and becomes accustomed to, those elements have changed and you're just kind of off put by that. And so we're trying to avoid that process happening. So take it seriously. Do not listen to any of it during that break. Then we come back to it after that break and we listen to it in a single sitting, just front to back, what we have so far. And we take notes on the things that we like and things that we want to change, ideas that pop up. Stephen King talks about when he gets to this stage of a book and he hasn't read his manuscript for, with him, it's a month. And he comes back and he reads the first draft. It's almost like he's rediscovering his own book. Like, it's been such a long time since he has worked on it that he doesn't fully remember all of the details. And so he can get inspired by himself in a way, and he'll jot down ideas for things that he'd like to change, things that just kind of don't work that he can like see objectively. So when we're making our album or EP, this is where we can start making those changes and really dive into the meat of it and start uncovering like the little bits of the fossil that we want to really expose or highlight. And another thing that I think is really good about Stephen King's approach to writing books is that he is reader focused, not author focused or publisher focused. And what this means is, in our case, it would be listener focused. We are looking at what we are doing with the song and interpreting it through what do we want people to feel when they listen to this. We're not asking the question of, well, what would my fans want to hear from me? Or what do, like, none of that, none of like the social side of it, but purely in the reception side of it. Music is expression, but expression on some level is communication. So we as the artist are communicating to the listener. What are we trying to communicate? What do we want them to understand from us? And honestly, so much of the process of drafting after this point, because after we come back to it, we'll start drafting it. So much of the drafting process from this point is less of the mechanics of production and is more so, what do we want the listener to feel? What reactions do we have to our own music that we have drafted out? And how can we craft that in an interesting way that gets us excited, but also clearly expresses that to the listener? You know, the thing to think about is like with movies, they'll do test screenings, and there's a good way to do test screenings and a bad way to do test screenings. The bad way to do test screenings is what they did in The Hobbit, where they literally just threw the movie in front of people and said, do you like this or do you not like it? People didn't like it, and so they just started changing parts of the movie, adding things in and removing stuff. Whereas the best way to use test screenings is to say, this is the emotion that we wanted to express, putting it in front of a test audience and seeing, did they receive that message? Did they understand that we were trying to make this scene tense or scary? Or did the scary monster's mask fall off halfway through? We didn't realize it, and now people are laughing at it. Like, it's about intent and translation of that intent. And again, we go through all of the songs this way. And then around draft 2 or draft 3, this is where we start showing it to friends. You might even want to have like a listening party with some people that you like their musical taste, or maybe even do like a feedback form or something like that. Like, incorporate other people into your process. And again, like I said, you're not trying to just appease people. Even bands who are like genuinely just making an album because they want to do it for themselves, they still love showing it to people and getting responses from it. You know, this stage could honestly be sometime after here. This is where it gets a little nebulous. But yeah, this is where you dive into having sort of like an ideal listener in your head, not in the sense of a fan that you want to appease, but in the sense of, man, when I hear music that I love and I hear like that one specific part, I blow up because I'm like, dude, that sounds sick. It's like that reaction, that golden reaction, writing your music with that reaction in mind, eliciting that feeling in mind, and then doing a little bit of pre-release testing to see if people are getting that. Again, not to change your intent, but to make sure that your intent is actually going all the way to the end and is being received by people. And so we go through all of this process, eventually ending in a final draft where you're just like, okay, at this point, I feel like I have properly expressed the emotions that I'm trying to express through these songs, whether they are the emotions of somebody who's been broken up with and expressing heartbreak, or the emotions of somebody at a party having a good time. I feel like I have expressed that. And then from that point, we go to what authors do, which is the editing, like arrangement editor, copy editor, which for musical terms would be the mixing and mastering process. It's making sure that everything translates well, that there's no errors in this original vision, and then formatting it for a book, which would probably be the equivalent of mastering, which you then send off for distribution, which is actually the same name that we have for music. So this is the process that I'm going through right now for my EP. It's going to be 6 songs, and yeah, I'm not showing them to anybody right now because I'm still in that first draft phase. I will most likely start arranging these guys into some kind of rough arrangement. I'll probably use like my SM7B and just start rambling vocals on top of all of them, just doing some rough top lining stuff and try to get some lyrical themes going, seeing what pops out of it. Because again, I am in the rough draft phase. I am not trying to make everything sound like it is perfect and pristine right from the get-go, which I could try to do that. But personally, for me, most of the albums that I love go through this similar process. Like even guys like Ed Sheeran, this is how they write stuff. He has the example of the dirty pipe. You need to turn on the water to get the dirt out of the pipe before clean water will start running through. You know, right now with this process of my EP, there is a lot of dirt coming out, but I'm just throwing it all out there right now and seeing what I can collect. But then after I go through this process, I'm gonna celebrate, I'm gonna take a break, maybe have fun with some photography stuff because I just got a new camera, and then I'll come back and listen to what I've made and start draft 2. So that's the process. A lot of people might be thinking, dude, why would you go through all this process when you can just make some songs and then just put them out? It doesn't need to be that complicated. And for some people, yes, it does not need to be that complicated. But for me,
Nah, because then it's like, what you doing it for? Ah, I guess. But I feel like EPs and albums are like statements of like your ability a little bit. Where it's like, hey, someone who hasn't heard of me, put this in front of them. An album was like, if you listen to this, you don't need to listen anymore. Like, not like you don't, but like this is an EP is like an abstract of the artist, where it's like, hey, this is the gist of like what I am, what I do. And an album is like the statement not to be like um dark, but like it's like a tombstone a little bit, where it's like that's your last. No, no, that's not the analogy I want to use actually. It's like it's final, and it's supposed to like to me have weight. Like this body of work is a representation of me. Like if I put this in front of you, I have nothing I need to say. It's like that's me, and you can come to your own conclusion, but that's like the epitome. That's the best way to put it. This is the epitome of me and like my ability. I feel like, eh, you don't have to, but I think you should. That's how I feel about EPs and albums.
Me making an album or an EP, it is like an artistic statement. It is, especially now in a time where there is almost no financial incentive to make an album or an EP. I mean, broken apart from the fact that you can just release all of the songs individually as singles, so you're kind of bulk processing singles. But regardless, I feel like with this process, you end up making an album or an EP that you're actually proud of and that you will be proud of like 10 years from now, and not going through all of these steps or like speeding through them all. I see a lot of people making albums or EPs that they just end up regretting, or not regretting, but like they wish they had done a little bit more, but they don't really know what more they could have done. I feel like this process is a little bit more straightforward for people who are doing things completely by themselves. If you're doing all the mixing, all the mastering, all the production, and you want to make more than just one really cool song, like you want to make something that artistically you can like build off of. Because I think that genuinely, if you are wanting to make a career in music, similar to the world of authors, you know, a lot of musicians, the way that they are talking about how music is disposable and nobody values musicians anymore, it's like this is kind of how authors have been treated for like a long time. And so I think the delineating factor between who is going to have a really cool career moving forward and who's going to not have the best career moving forward, it's almost entirely going to be based off of the quality of the stuff that you're making. And you can take that in two ways. One is you can make a bunch of TikTok bait songs that get a bunch of views immediately once they're released, and then people don't really listen to them ever again, which is a lot of songs right now. Or you can make an album slash EP that is so cohesive and quality and has been refined and made in a very focused, creative way that 10 years from now, people will still love it, because those are the albums that I really love. So yeah, when people say I want to make an EP or an album, I think people need to understand the amount of work that goes into it. But I hope that people are not scared off by this video. I think that making an album or an EP can be an extremely fulfilling thing artistically, and if you do it right, it can be one of those legacy pieces that you just are proud of for the rest of your life. But yeah, I'll be keeping you guys up to date with my EP and how that works. But yeah, I think that's it. I'll be talking to you guys next week. See ya.
All right, good luck, man. Y'all check it out. That's Velvet Year, also known as Seth Goodwin, How to Make an EP. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, post notifications, all that. Talk to y'all